Whether you're home or away, stay connected to your team with T-Mobile, the network that covers 99% of people in America. They've been investing billions to light up their best network ever. From your backyard to a sold-out stadium, get T-Mobile's best coverage yet. Plus, with T-Mobile, you get a price lock guarantee, so they won't raise the rate of your talk, text, and data, ever. There's never been a better time to switch. Visit your local T-Mobile store today. Coverage not available in some areas. Price lock exclusions like taxes, fees, select promos, and third-party services apply. See T-Mobile.com.
Hail, cheers. Welcome to the Always Cheating Podcast. My name is Josh. Brandon is on vacation. We have a special fill-in guest, Erik Sibils. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Josh. How are you?
I am doing well. Thank you. How are you? Are you good?
I'm good. I felt like I nailed like the pregnant pause there, right?
I think you completely nailed it. Erik is a longtime, I was going to say a longtime friend of the pod, a longtime friend of myself. I've known you for probably about 20 years now. And you are having, and I've been playing in the same FPL league for 7 or 8 years now, I think, at this point. And you're having easily, I would say, your best season ever, right? You are currently 704 in the world. So we have a top 1,000 player on this week's pod. So once again, Erik, welcome and thanks for coming on.
Sure. Yeah. It's fun. Like, honestly, like you're the guy that got me into playing this game. And, I grew up with your brother, if anyone's wondering why I'm the friend of the pod. But here we are where I'm doing well and I don't have a good reason for it, but we're going to try to figure it out today, right?
Let's do it. It feels like everything has sort of clicked for you so far. What chips have you used so far in the season?
So I haven't used my free hit yet, so that's strategic, right? Okay. So I just dropped my wild card before the last game week, right? Mm-hmm. So blank week, and I set it up, and I brought in I brought in enough players to play for last week, and then enough guys to like take advantage of the double game week, right? That's what we're all trying to do, and I'm trying to I'll channel Brandon here too in the same place where it's like it's very simple, right? Like just watch the games and pick the guys that you think they're going to get you the points. And I know that's go ahead.
It's somehow it's not that simple though. This is the tricky part. It's like Texas Hold'em, right? It's just get the best hand and win that way. But it's I think you're underselling yourself a little bit. I feel like you've been very, very smart. But actually, I remember this is the first year you joined our league, and I remember you went in early on the Suarez, the SAS. Remember the famous SAS front line?
Of course.
The Suarez, Aguero, Sturridge front line, and you were just sort of like, these are the 3 best players. I just have to have them all on my team, and you sort of let structure be damned. And I remember that was I think you if you didn't win our mini league, you were at the top all season, and I think that so I think there is sometimes it's like this stuff is all very clear in hindsight, right? But you have to be like really clear-eyed in the moment.
Well, yeah. Back then, I had a little bit of an advantage because I've been watching Suarez play for a long time. I have a proclivity to Uruguayan players, so I watched them play in the Netherlands for a long time and in Uruguay. But I know that I'm reducing it to something that's a little simple, but if you just the best way to play FPL, I love the stats guys. I love the podcast that you had with God, I forget his name, but the stats-based guy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was great. I love listening to that stuff because if you can commit yourself to applying yourself to playing a certain way, then you can take advantage of that. But if you just watch the games and you talk to people who are involved in the clubs and you can figure out how people line up, then you can take advantage of that. You can just kind of hey, we realize that Luke Shaw is going to have some attacking returns, and that's what we're trying to take advantage of, right?
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think we'll get into game week 29 from here. But I just one final note there, which is that I think that you are honest when it comes to talking to people at clubs. I have gone back. I used to do a lot of club forum stuff where I would dive into club like forums for particular clubs and try to get an idea for lineups and injury news, things like that. And then I kind of gave it up at some point, and there's so much misinformation. Like people talk about this really in every form on social media, but I feel like FPL misinformation has gotten a lot worse. And a lot of people say things that just aren't necessarily true with extreme confidence. And I'm finding that it's very, very helpful for me to jump into some of these team forums and get some team news. So I do think that's a good place to look. So anyway, let's move on to international break news. The biggest news, I think, is that as of 2 hours ago, Antonio Conte is out, which I guess we all kind of saw coming, right? It was in the cards, but now it is officially official. Conte out.
Man, like, it's crazy to see all these moves in international football, and like, man, you see Nagelsmann has been sacked from Bayern. Well, like, that's out of like crazy, and like the whole like, yeah, it's wild to see these changes that just are kind of like a little bit almost not necessarily out of nowhere, but it's just like, why are we doing this mid-season when there's really little to no impact of changing your manager, right? Like, Spurs are what they are. Like, Harry Kane is the talisman, and Rodrigo Bentancur being injured is a huge like disruptor for what they're trying to do, and it sucks for Spurs fans. Like, I'm not a Spurs fan, so whatever, it is what it is. But like, it seems like a huge like knee-jerk reaction, even though what he was saying was super like inflammatory, right?
Yeah. What do you think? Do you see any impact on FPL? I mean, Kane is in an interesting spot right now where he does not blank in 32 like some other top players do, but he has no doubles down the stretch here. So I don't know. I mean, I can't imagine it impacting too many other players. I mean, I guess the concern would be maybe that someone would come in and maybe abandon the three at the back, wing back style, but it feels really late in the season to do that, don't you think?
No, absolutely. Like, I think a lot of the questions that we had about Spurs going into the season is like, people were very excited about Perisic, right? They were like, oh, he's going to get tons of attacking returns under Conte, and he's going to do it. And, he's hasn't had too many minutes to play, and he's started here and there and whatnot. But, but like, Harry Kane is kind of like unaffected. Like, he's just kind of one of those fixture-proof players, right? He's going to get you a goal, and that's about it. I don't know. Like, I captained Harry Kane last week, and we all thought he was going to explode, right? And he just kind of come see, come saw, scored his one goal, and then like Harry, and then the Saka captainers all celebrated in our face, right?
Yep, exactly. I think I don't see it changing too much. I think that's right. I think I'm still out on Richarlison, still out on Son. Maybe Son is like late in the season. I don't know, game week 38, they play away to Leeds, right? But I certainly until late May, I don't plan to consider anyone but Harry Kane. Maybe Kane in 31 if there was if Haaland ended up being genuinely injured because they play Bournemouth at home. But I think otherwise, I don't see it changing that much. And then what about the international break itself? I know you've been tracking it fairly closely. What any like thoughts on any of the fixtures that took place, or there's been some injury news obviously as well with Rashford and Haaland.
Oh, for sure. So, like, as we were talking about Son, right? So, Son played, South Korea played Colombia, and he scored 2 goals. Like, I don't know if you saw that free kick goal he scored, but it was beautiful.
No, I didn't see it.
It's just kind of hard to, like, translate international success to what they're going to produce for us in FPL, right?
Yeah.
And so I watched... as you said, I'm Uruguayan, so I watched Uruguay play Japan, and I was like watching to watch Uruguay, of course, but I was keeping a close eye on Mitoma, and he didn't touch the ball almost at all. It was kind of like confusing to me, and Mitoma's the guy that I'm thinking about bringing in as one of my free transfers this week, and obviously, like you said before, we're looking at injuries to Rashford. So Rashford was my bus team captain. Like, he was the guy. But now, who knows? Like, is he injured? He's walking around New York. Do we need to get you out do some boots on the ground?
Reporting? I saw the photo. He looked like he was wearing a jacket that cost, like, conservatively, like $1 million. Like he looked like he was like it was like some kind of camel coat. He had like a big top hat on. It was a very like he was going for it. I think he was about to take like a horse ride in Central Park or something like that. I don't really know what was going on, but I think that Rashford is fine. I think that Haaland is fine. I was just checking the news a couple of hours ago, and it sounds like there's very little concern now that Haaland won't be ready for game week 29. I think the fact that Man City play Liverpool at home, I think, is also a factor there. Even if it's a slightly weakened Liverpool squad this year, maybe not slightly, but it's maybe not the same squad. They've been up for these big matches, and I just can't see Pep resting Haaland for a match like this, right? If they were playing Forest at home, maybe Haaland gets rested. And I think the same with Rashford. I think Rashford is just like, well, I wasn't even starting for England in the World Cup, so maybe I'll just like I've been playing a ton of minutes for Man United over the last couple of weeks, right, with the Europa League and everything. So I think he just got a rest, honestly, and I think that's really why he didn't he didn't travel with England. Oh man,
like the fake injury international break stuff is running wild right now.
Yeah.
So like Rashford, like it's reported as a toe injury, right? So of course that'll hurt for him, and it is what it is. And you got the same thing like Darwin didn't go play with Uruguay because he had a lacerated ankle. Fake injury. Yeah, that's basically what it was.
What you're supposed to say is back spasms. Back spasms is like the hardest thing to prove. That's what they do in the NBA all the time. It's just like, I think, what's his name? Who's the guy for Portland who's now out for the rest of like the last 9 weeks of the season? Damian Lillard. I think he's just going to have back spasms for 9 consecutive weeks. So I mean, get a better draft spot.
Not to go hardcore NBA pod here because that's what we like, but man,
yeah.
Like Damian Lillard should just like, I play in Portland. This is my injury report for the rest of my season.
I know. Didn't you do some data crunching for the NBA? I feel like you were involved in that for a while.
Yeah, I did. So I used to work for a company that was doing like video statistics, stuff like that. So I was doing a lot of statistical stuff for the NBA, and it was cool. And I love I love the NBA, but like the way that I treat football is with my heart, right? I watch it and it's just NBA is my head and the football is my heart. And I feel like that's...
But if you have the analytics in your head already... See, I feel like you were doing yourself a slight disservice earlier when you're like, I just watch the TV and whoever is on the TV the most is the player I bring in. I think it's, I don't know. I felt like I had to give you a little shout out there.
Oh, sure. Like you said, like I did spend a lot of time in like the statistics and analytics game, and basketball is my favorite sport. I'll say it, but like football has my heart. Just because, when you're South America and you watch it, and it is what it is. And I think that's like the way that you watch it. So what you're saying is like, when we watch these international games, right, we're trying to pull data from their performance in their international game. And it's hard to really translate what we're trying to expect from them FPL wise when we watch these guys. So it's like when we watch, like Rashford has this toe injury. Is it a real injury? When Haaland has this groin injury, is it a real injury, right? Like we're relying on reports from his dad, right? How much are we supposed to like really expect? Yeah. I'll go with what, here's a Brandon term. I'll fill in a little bit for him. And he says that we're fading people. That the FPL strategy this season is about fading because we only have a certain amount of budget and spots in our team.
Right. I've had mixed results with the fading approach this year, especially the last couple of weeks. But yeah, I think that's right. So you currently have Haaland or you don't have Haaland? You're fading Haaland at the moment?
I dropped Haaland on my wild card last week.
Okay, got it.
And here we'll see how it works out for me. But right now, So I would like to ask you, even though we're competing in our mini leagues.
Sure, go ahead.
Who's your captain pick for this week? Let's just get right into it.
Marcus Rashford. I need to see him train. and make sure that he plays. But I even on my bus team, I still have so the team that I picked just in case I get hit by a bus later on this week. I have him as my captain at the moment, and then I have Bruno as my vice. So I'm really leaning into the. I'm not really sure why, because you look at. I know why. It's because they've been just playing so well together. But I think it's just. The reason I said I'm not sure why for a moment there was just because Newcastle away and Brentford at home aren't exactly the easiest fixtures, and I think I could maybe talk myself into a Matoma captaincy. I mean, I have Salah as well. I just ultimately, I will very rarely take a kind of like if I have if there's an opportunity to captain a double game week player and they are one of like basically I'll almost always pick a top 4 team when it comes to a double game week, and it's just they just tend to be teams that are going to have more. They're just going to score more, right? It's going to be a little easier for them to get goals. Maybe they're a little more likely to have a really explosive match. So yeah, I don't know. At the moment it's Rashford and Bruno. I think Matoma's a shout. I don't know, someone like Salah doesn't quite make sense because they're away in both of those matches. I don't know. Yeah, so I guess it really does come down to Rashford or Matoma for me. What about you? What are you thinking at the moment?
So I am currently bus team Rashford captain.
Okay,
and
all right,
it's
simpatico
for sure, but it's difficult too because even if he plays only one game, right? Even if he skips the Newcastle away, that's the harder of the 2 matches, right?
Yeah.
Are we really that out of the question that Rashford is going to score more goals against Brentford at home, right? That seems like a logical pick. It's been really interesting. I find that Manchester United is one of the more interesting teams in world football, period, just based on their attacking formation and the departure of Ronaldo. And I find it just the Casemiro ban is throwing everything for a loop, right?
So true. It really messed up my early 20. Not that I need to keep rehashing this, but my game week 27, I went all in early on Man United because of that Southampton match, and the Casemiro red just annihilated it, right? Because that ended up being a 0-0 match.
Yeah, it's wild. So I've been reading a decent amount of articles and talking to people. Shout out to Shiv on the Discord, asking Manchester United fans, how do they feel about how Casemiro affects not only the defensive, but also the offensive, properties of the Manchester United team. Because, right, he's plays kind of that kind of defensive, but also offensive role where he's giving Fernandes not only the ability to go out and attack a bit more, but also they kind of not necessarily a double pivot, but but it also affects it. Man, are they going to be able to defend with Shaw? I have Shaw, Rashford, and Fernandes, so it's that Casemiro ban is affecting all 3 of these guys that I have.
Yeah, I know. It's I think we have. I guess I have Shaw, Rush. I have the same trio as you, and at this point, there's just nothing we can do, right? Because we just have to keep them for 29. Then they play Everton and Forest in 30 and 31. They blank in 32, and I may have to drop one of them to field a full squad because now I don't have my free hit left. I really did a number on my team, Eric, a couple of weeks ago, but that's fine. That's fine. I've got plenty of weeks to sort everything out. But then they double again in 34, and they double again most likely in game week 37. So that's the other piece of news before we get into our game week 29 discussion, which is the double game weeks are now confirmed for game week 34. And so has that changed your thinking at all, or is it just kind of nice? We kind of knew they were going to slot in here, but it's kind of nice to have it confirmed, right? I don't know if it changed anything really.
Yeah. So I don't typically think that far ahead. I just try to play the game week in front of me. But when you kind of have that backlog of games that Brighton have had, it's just kind of what. So on my wild card last week, I brought in Steele. So we got news that Sanchez out. Steele is like super cheap, and I had like it was an easy swap from Ward to him, and we knew what it was, and I just feel like when you were planning for these doubles and stuff like that, it's like you can't like sacrifice so much of what your transfers are going to be right now for this game week in order to plan for 34, right? That's pretty far away.
It's too far away. Yep, I agree.
So, like you said, this Brighton and United are going to get the double, and then Liverpool and Fulham, City and West Ham. I mean, what really is that going to affect for us?
I don't think that much really. I mean, I think it's nice to have it all kind of locked in, and shout out of course to Ben C for being so on top of the ball when it comes to this the double, basically just making all these predictions for us. And I think the one thing is it makes things a little more clear, and I think the thing that really shines out to me now is that Brighton have 4 double game weeks in the final 10 weeks of the season, and to kind of see it all laid out now as things get a little more confirmed. So they don't play in 32, but 32 aside, they play twice in game week 29. They played twice in 34, twice in 36, and twice in 37. So my decisions are basically kind of like you. I wildcarded a couple weeks ago. My decisions are pretty locked in for game week 29. But as I think ahead, as I think past this game week, keeping in mind the whole time that I'm going to want to have these double Brighton players for all these double game weeks. It maybe changes my decision making a little bit in terms of who I'm willing to transfer out and bring back in, right? Because I just don't necessarily want to waste a transfer. I mean, because effectively, if I take out a Brighton player, that's effectively 2 transfers, right? Because there's a transfer out and then a transfer to bring him back in. And so I think when we think about game week basically like 30 on, it's just every transfer becomes so precious down the stretch, unless you're just willing to burn 4s like they're going out of style. And I think that's generally I think it's fine, but I just think if you plan well enough, you don't need to be burning 4, right? And then you can sort of just, those are, if you're in a close mini league race, like you and I used to be before you pulled away a little bit the last few weeks, but it's, but I think it really is important to watch those transfers and make sure that you don't, because again, if you're going to take out anybody they need to bring back in, you really just need to have a clear strategy. Now, I think in some cases that could be fine. If you have a Brighton defender, let's say, and what you really want to have is the Brighton trio of midfielders across the middle, then maybe that's a fine transfer out, right? Because you can, when you move a player back in, you're not going to bring in the same player. You're going to bring in a player that you think is going to be a little more helpful down the stretch. So anyway, I don't want to get too in the weeds either about 34. I think you're right, but there was a question that GP asked, which is, do you think it's better to bench boost in game week 29 or game week 34? Of those two, which do you think?
Oof. Well, I mean, it depends on how you navigated the last couple of weeks, right? So, like, I wildcarded last week to fill 2 different roles, right? Get enough players to fill the full 11 during those blanks, and then also to set up the bench boost this week. So right now, like, my bench boost is gonna slay if I can make the right transfer this week. If you don't have it set up right now, then like it's difficult to say what 34 is going to present for us, right? We can't predict the future. There could be injuries, anything. If you feel confident that there's going to be something coming up that you can take advantage of, then by all means wait. But right now, in my personal situation, I set it up. So my bench boost is already pressed, ready to go.
Me too. I think that it's a part of it is that Arsenal play Leeds at home. So if you have any Arsenal players, that's a great fixture. I mean, if you weren't going to bench boost this week, and credit to everyone who bench boosted in 27 because that did work out extraordinarily well. But if you aren't bench boosting this week, I think you find yourself in a really tricky spot where someone like Harry Kane or Rashford and Haaland gets benched, where you're benching someone like Saka at home to Leeds, or where you're benching a double game week player, right? Like someone like I have Dominic Solanke as this kind of short term punt, right? Oof. And like, well, let's see how it pans out.
No, I'm all in on.
It was for 29. Yeah.
I'm all in on Bournemouth, so we can talk about that in a minute. But
all right, that sounds good. But but you end up you might end up having to bench a couple of double game week players. Whereas I think that 34, it's a little easier to get away with some of the benching decisions you might have to make in a double, right? Like Arsenal play Chelsea, just a trickier match. I don't know. There's just a handful of players out there who might be just a little bit easier to bench than they would be in game week 29. Whereas in game week 29, there's almost no players that you would bench that you wouldn't really honestly want to start in an ideal situation.
Yeah. So just to get specific about my team, so I'm ready to go about this bench boost, and I have 3 Arsenal players, as I'm sure everyone does. So I have Saka, Odegaard, and White. So right now I'm trying to get one of the Brighton midfielders. Right now it's Mitoma. I'm probably going to transfer out Odegaard and get Mitoma in, and that way I'm rolling with a bench boost, and I think that this is probably one of the better double game week bench boost options of the last, like you said, I've been playing for 9 years, 10 years. This seems like it, right?
Yep.
That's it. I think if you're set up to do it now, we should do it. Right? Like, why are we waiting to
listen? Sometimes the answer is easy, and we just move on. I think that we're on the same page here. I think the game week 29 is it. GP, you have your answer. GP, good luck to you. Whichever way you end up going. So Eric, one last thing. This is how I like to treat the people who ask us questions with authoritative, definitive answers, even though I don't actually know what their team looks like, because that's the only way to do it, because the answer to almost all these questions is really, it depends, but that doesn't really lead to a very good podcast, right?
Not this time. We're saying definitively do it now.
That's true.
Slam that button.
That's true. Exactly. The button's been slammed. So one final thing before we take a break and talk about Game Week 29. Eric, you are a Patreon supporter. You have been for several years, I believe. And what I would say you're most active in the Always Cheating Discord, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. If you guys like the way that Josh and Brandon described the game to us, it's like that's the way to it. Like, you can listen to the other stuff and it's very analytical and stuff like that, but like the point of playing Fantasy Premier League is to talk crap with people and whatever. It's fun. I guarantee you, join the Discord right now. There's so many cool channels. We don't just talk about FPL, right? Talk about music and movies and shows and stuff. And there's some really cool personalities that just talk about stuff all day. There's people from Australia that are talking in the middle of the night for us because we're here, and people in Europe. So there's like constant discourse going on. I just highly recommend, if you like to talk and you like to banter about, and please join Discord. It's awesome.
Well, thank you. That's exactly how I scripted that out for you. So thank you for reading it so perfectly. But patreon.com/alwaysteams, where you can go to support the podcast. Let's take a break. We'll get back and we're going to talk about Game Week 29. All right, Eric, we're back. Double game week 29. It's almost like a super double game week, right? Because so many people play twice. So I'm gonna start calling this super game week 29 instead of double. All right, that's my new phrasing for this week. And just a quick walkthrough before we get into it for anybody who has either forgotten or just haven't been paying as much attention to double game weeks. I mean, if you're not, I don't know, if you're not in the weeds on this stuff too much, you may be surprised by just how many people double in this game week. And so just a quick rundown here. Aston Villa play twice. They play away to Chelsea, away to Leicester, Bournemouth, Fulham, Brighton, Brentford, Brighton away, Man United away. Brighton play Brentford at home and Bournemouth away. Chelsea play Villa and Liverpool at home. Leeds play Arsenal and Forest. Leicester play Palace away, Villa home. Liverpool played away to Man City and Chelsea. Again, these are all just the teams that play twice in Game Week 29. Man United play away to Newcastle, home to Brentford. Newcastle host Man United away to West Ham. Forest play home to Wolves and away to Leeds. And West Ham play Southampton and Newcastle at home. So 12 teams play twice in Game Week 29. And it's sort of the international break, which I feel like makes things even more complicated, because I have to look at the numbers around there, something like that. But I just feel like that the first Saturday after the international break is always I feel like you always get some unexpected results, right? It's like everyone's just, it's not quite, you're not quite at like full match sharpness. And sometimes that's a good thing in terms from an FPL perspective. But I feel like from like a match table perspective, sometimes you get like a weird 0-0 that you weren't expecting, or, everything's just a little shaggier, wouldn't you say?
Hey, like, let's get weird. That's what it's uncharted territory. Like the whole World Cup messed with everything, and now we got this random, scheduled international break where, people are playing games, and then all of a sudden we're back. And not only are we back, but we're back with like these crazy double game weeks. And
Yes.
And not only is it hard to like figure out who we want to play, or like not everybody has their bench boost left. Not everybody knows who to captain. Not everybody knows who's going to play both games because of international travel. Yep. So it's like, this is kind of like uncharted territory for even people who've been playing this game for a very long time, right?
Yep, very much so. Yeah, and so I think that for anyone who's wildcarded the last few weeks, or is planning to wildcard into 29, which was a plan I originally kicked around, you probably have already put a lot of thinking into this game week. And so I just want to talk a little bit about, rather than go team by team, I think we could just talk a little bit about our plans, and then there's a few listener questions that I thought we'd get into as well. So, given that you wildcarded in 28, that and so you should be reasonably set up for 29. But I'm imagining if you were trying to maximize 28 and 29, you might be in a position where you need to make a couple of transfers, one or maybe two. So you mentioned Matoma already. Would that most likely be Odegaard to Matoma then? Is that right?
So that was basically the plan. Right now is just get one of these Brighton guys in. So we can talk about who's like McAllister is a really sexy pick, and you got March with all the statistics, but like Matoma's the guy. Come on, we watch him play.
I think that Matoma's the guy too. I agree. Are there any other moves that you would consider? Any -4s that might be on the table, or anything more complicated that you might kick around?
Man, I don't think so. Like I set it up pretty good. Like I got Kepa and Steele as my goalkeepers. Easy stuff. Yep. Trippier, easier stuff. Yep. Mings, shout out to Mings owners for last week. We did great.
The Mings crew.
Let's go.
Yep.
And then, of course, Shaw. And you got, so the one that's like we were talking about earlier, the Casemiro ban is a little weird for United assets. So it's like, man, like, should I keep Odegaard as a single player and treat Rashford as a single player? Mm-hmm. And maybe instead of getting Odegaard out and considering that Rashford may be a single game week player, and get him out and get Matoma. So that's the only debate that I really have.
Yeah, I think that my hope. I did this more elaborate plan for I wildcarded in 27, I free hit in 28, and then I have a squad that is basically a double game week squad that I put together in 27. And so I have, at the moment, 13 double game week players, and then I have Haaland and Gabriel as my two non-doublers, both of which I don't plan to do anything with. I'm just going to hold on to them. So my plan at the moment is actually to hold my transfer for 29, and then I guess the only way I would maybe use it is if we found out some injury news. Somebody came back with an injury from an international break. So far, I feel like we've been fairly lucky in that regard. I'll say again, I don't consider the Haaland or Rashford injuries to be serious. If Rashford were significant, like if his toe was this serious, I just don't think he'd be taking these horse carriage rides in Central Park. I think that he'd be I don't even know, like rehabbing with his foot up on his couch watching. I don't know. What do you think, like EastEnders or something? I don't know what Marcus Rashford would watch. But I think he'd be taking a little more easy. And then Haaland, it's not that I don't think a hamstring is a thing that can be aggravated very easily. And so I guess I was a little surprised that he went home, just because they were Euro qualifiers, but It just sounds like by all accounts they expect him to be ready for Man United. So if that stays that way, then I will hold my transfer, which will make it a little easier for me to not feel ill about about my ill-fated free hit in game week 28, because I'll have enough transfers that I can sort of hokey pokey in some players in and out for 32 and then again for 34 without getting too in the weeds on my own squad. So we talked about captains a little bit already. Francis Mack asks, is it too aggressive to captain Matoma? What do you think about just straight up captaining Matoma this week?
Before I kind of considered the whole Rashford thing, like I said, bus team Rashford. But man, if I'm going to spend a transfer on Matoma, like I've heard you say this a lot, right? If you're going to get a guy in and you're going to spend the transfer, even if you don't even take a hit, why not captain him? So for me, that's like 50% on the table for me, Matoma captain.
Okay. But what about if Rashford trains Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? If he's back and playing, does that change anything for you?
I would probably stick with Rashford and just captain him. Even if he plays, but like I said, like even if he plays just the one game, right? Like he's going to probably bang, and that's what it is. Like I think I saw an article today when I was researching a bit. They were saying, like, are we overrating these doubles? And even if Rashford plays only the one game, man, he's on fire, man. This guy's incredible. Like, what a player, what an incredible asset to do.
All with this toe pain, all with this harrowing toe pain.
Oh man, if he can, it's like the Jordan flu game, right?
Yeah, exactly. Every time he walks out there, it's a portrait in courage. Exactly. So good for him.
Yeah, I don't know. Like captain is tricky. Honestly, like I'm not confident on giving any sort of advice on captains because, like with so many players doubling, it's just impossible to predict what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Like especially when it's difficult to understand like the value of the captainship just period every day, right?
Yeah.
Like a lot of these defenders, like I've seen so many people like take chances on defenders, and it really is like I feel like if you're trying to gain ground, then man, what a chance would it be to take on like a Chilwell or a Trippier or even Kepa or a Mings? Like a lot of times when these defenders get clean sheets, they're going to get bonus points, right? And I feel like that's a risk that if you're willing to take that, captain the defender, captain the goalkeeper, go for it. This is the time to do it with double game weeks. But if you're in my position, and, I'm really high up and I'm trying to play more shield than sword, I'm probably just going to go with Rashford.
I'll throw Mo Salah in there as a kind of like slightly under the radar captain pick. I mean, he's Mo Salah, so obviously he's never completely off the radar. But you look at those fixtures and think, Man City away, Chelsea away. Those aren't great fixtures. But Liverpool have consistently been at their best when they're playing the top opposition. Like they're a squad that is really not at their kind of peak of 3 or 4 years ago. But when they play these top teams, it seems like it like triggers something in them, right? And not Real Madrid, who is like their bogey team, and just they just never want to see them. They never want to see those white kits again. But I think that when they play other opposition, we just saw this with Man United match a couple of weeks ago. It like sort of brings out this like lion in winter sort of thing, and they become very, very potent again. And I could just see. It's not that I necessarily see them winning the Man City match or the Chelsea match, although Chelsea I think is maybe a little more likely. But it's just that I think that they will score goals in both those matches. I think there's a good chance that Salah's involved in those goals. So if you wanted to be a little different, you were able to fit Salah into your squad, which isn't easy if you don't already have him. I think that he is an option. I think for a kind of under the radar captain pick as well.
Oh, I'm with you. If I had Salah, he would probably be my captain. I'm just not ready to like bring him in right now. It's not in the cards as far as budget and just positionally. But I think Salah's a good shout. Like I think if you have one of the Brighton guys, man, like that's a good shout too. Like I'm going to bring in Matoma, but like if you're super confident in McAllister or March, man, go for it. I think those guys are gonna bang goals. It's just a matter of.
Yeah. What about Bruno? Any thought to Bruno? He doesn't have a crippling toe injury, but does have the same fixtures as Rashford.
Oh, for sure. So, like, I brought in Bruno on my wild card thinking, I was like, cool, like, let's just bring him in. He's going to be great. I know we've said this several times, but the Casemiro thing is just so weird I feel like United's structure is so dependent on who's playing, and that who's playing completely changes the way that they act. So, like, I really like Fernandes with Weghorst up there, whatever, attracting defenders super close up there. And so I think that Fernandes is going to probably get more shots per se, but I think with Casemiro out, he may or may not have to absorb a little bit of the defensive liability stuff.
I know. It's just what you said. The Casemiro thing is just such a killer for anybody who is even like anybody who has these players or was considering bringing them in. It just adds this lack of confidence maybe in the entire squad, and it's really unfortunate because I think in some ways it would have been very simple to just be like, yeah, Captain Rashford, Vice Captain Bruno, and sort of don't worry too much about the captaincy. But now I think it's actually probably good for the game. Honestly, it's a little more open, I think, now in terms of who you might want to pick.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's crazy to think like how much United's like potential changes with like the structure of their team. Like, there's a complete difference of like when you play Rashford. So if Rashford's going to be out of game, then they're going to be playing Sancho, which is a completely different player. Yeah. And then it's depending on who they play on the other side. Like Anthony is a completely different player from Garnacho or Facundo Pellistri, and these guys, like that whole United team is so like dependent on who they're playing. Credit to Ten Hag for being able to figure out the tactics of who they're playing, but like Fernandes is going to be a central piece. I just don't know what that means for him FPL wise.
Yeah, I think that it's if you have him, I don't know. It's like I just somehow trust that Rashford can come through no matter what. I mean, I guess now we're just kind of saying the same thing. So let's move on. Let's move on to the next question, which is from Mike Thunder, and he asks, "Who are the best double game week keepers?" I know a lot of people were sticking with Ward as a second keeper, or they just had some other issue that or they haven't wild carded yet, let's say, and or they have maybe. They have Sanchez still, right? Sanchez, the Brighton keeper, who's been removed from the starting spot for Steele at the moment. And so, what do you think is, who would you sort of put in your top maybe 3 or 4 captain picks, or goalkeeper picks for game week 29?
So I'm rolling with Kepa and Steele. That was on my wild card. I'm bench boosting, and that's just Kepa's a pretty he's been great since the World Cup. Chelsea have been pretty crap overall, but he's getting saves. The one big shout, I know a lot of people can't fit Steele under the team because they're rocking a lot of Brighton players. You got Estupiñán, and you're maybe playing 2 midfielders. Man, Neto for Bournemouth. I mentioned it earlier. That guy's got 5 or 6 saves a game, and the rest of their season is fairly not easy. Obviously, nothing's easy for Bournemouth, but I think that's the guy that you look at. Neto, look him up.
I think that's right. I was trying. I mean, you could make an argument for De Gea possibly if you weren't already tripled up at Man United. I think that he's let's say Bruno just doesn't make sense for your squad for some reason, and you're just not gonna. It's like you have Rashford, you have Shaw, and you have one open Man United spot. I think that De Gea makes sense, not just because he plays. Although you have to be a little careful with this one because you couldn't have Steele and De Gea because they don't play in 32. Although if you're free hitting, that's why it's so complicated to talk about FPL right now because these chips are everyone's in kind of a different spot right now with where they are. But let's say that you are able to free hit or you have a keeper that plays in 32. Then De Gea has the double in 29. Then they play Everton and Forest, and then they have another double game week in 34 where they play Villa and Brighton, and then 2 relatively straightforward matches. And they play Bournemouth and Chelsea in 37. So if you brought in someone like De Gea, you'd actually have him for 3 double game weeks over the final 10 weeks of the season. And so I think that is something to consider. I mean, that's really the appeal of Steele as well, right? Is that he's 4 million and they have 4 double game weeks in the final 9. So, just something to consider. Although I guess the flip side of this is that you might be in a position where you have like in 36, for example, Steele and that it looks like it would be 37 where Brighton double and Man United double as well. So you have to, unless you were bench boosting in 37, which is like, that's real galaxy brain territory there. You'd have to pick one or the other. I guess, I don't know. Look at those two. I guess I'd probably go Steele at home. So yeah, I mean, what do you think about Iverson, the Ward replacement? Is that just too risky, do you think?
Man, it just depends. Like if you have a free hit or a wild card, then sure. But like, let's not like overly parse the goalkeeper position, right? Like, let's not take hits.
Yeah.
Please don't take a hit for a goalkeeper. It's just not worth it. And but if we're rolling with what we got, I mean, like Steele is a great alternative to the Brighton like points. Like, yeah. Right? Like
I like this. I like the Neto shot because especially if you've already if you need a keeper for 32, Neto plays in 32, right? They play West Ham at home, which isn't a bad fixture. I think you're right. I mean, if he just got, let's say he got 6 saves in both of the 29. I mean, they're home for both those matches too, so it's not inconceivable that Brighton keep a clean sheet, is it? I mean, it's conceivable. It's not likely, I would say, in either of those two, but it's. One can dream up a scenario, right, where Bournemouth keep a clean sheet in that match. One of those two matches.
No, I just feel like the goalkeeper position for me is a punt, and I've been looking at getting myself into the Bournemouth points because it's crazy. They're technically so bad. Like, look at their position in the table, but man, it's just so hard to get into it because like Solanke is like cool and it's fun to play him, and you got like the Billing and you got all those midfielders guys. But like I think that if you're going to take a risk, the best place to take a risk is in the goalkeeper, right? Yeah, and it's I just think like you said, like just the home and their schedule moving forward is like pretty good. So if you're looking for like a backup goalkeeper or someone to play in your bench boost, Neto is the guy if you can't, if you have 3 Brighton players that you can't fit Steele in.
I like this. I don't know that Brendan and I would have gone with a Neto shout here. So this is you're bringing something new to the conversation, which I like. And Emi Martinez would be fun too, but he's 0.4 million more than Neto, and I'm kind of with you there, where it's just like just save the 0.4 million, right? It's just so unlikely you're going to get serious points from either of these keepers, or maybe it's kind of equally random, so there's no point in spending too much money on it, which I guess would be the argument for someone like Iverson, but he's just I mean, first of all, we could see Ward back. It doesn't even seem like Leicester allow that many saves, so I just don't really see a lot of appeal in the Iverson shout. I don't either. Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on then. Question number 5 is, how seriously should we take the injuries to Rashford and Haaland? I think, I've sort of given my thoughts on this, but it is a very important question, and obviously one we should have more information on as the week goes on. But are you taking those seriously, the Rashford Haaland injuries? I mean, I'm team fade Haaland, so that his injury wasn't going to affect whether I have him or not. So it's just, we can easily go from Kane to Haaland if he comes back and he starts banging. Easy enough. Yeah. The Rashford one is a little bit harder because I think that a lot of people, including me, were probably planning on captaining Rashford, right? Right. Yeah. So it's just like when it starts affecting your captain choices, that's when it starts getting to the point where it's like, oh man, I'm refreshing Twitter. Like, what is he doing in New York? Yeah. So the Haaland, if you have him, keep him. If you don't have him, even better for us. It's fine. But the Rashford one, I don't know I don't have any extra information to apply here. All right, well, let's end things on a fun note then here. This comes from Lindelwald, who asks, who are the best differential options in any position for those people who want to go for broke in the final 5 game weeks? And just as a refresher, a differential is somebody who has ownership. It kind of depends on your interpretation, but let's say, obviously everyone can own the same player in fantasy, but their ownership is less than 15%, let's say. So, yeah, I mean, we don't have to actually pull up these numbers, but just roughly, someone whose ownership is fairly low. I don't know why I'm explaining differentials on like our 33rd podcast of the season, but just in case anyone is new to it, this week's episode, that's what it is. So, we talked about Neto a little bit already. I think he's a good shout. Maybe there's like another. I think maybe instead of going position by position, I wonder if it's easier to kind of look at some of these squads, the ones that double or the ones that have good fixtures moving forward. And so, are there a couple of teams that you think are just flying a little bit under the radar? And I mean, you mentioned Mings already. I mean, I think Mings was a great shout. Obviously, they double in game week 29 as well. But do any teams or players come to mind?
Oh, man. So you said 15%. Mm-hmm. Lucky enough, Ollie Watkins is 14.9% owned. Beautiful. So he qualifies for this, our little differential.
Scored last week too, right?
And he's scored 6 in the last 8. Yep. At this point, it's kind of hard to call forward players differentials just because there's so few that we really consider to be assets. Yep. So I think Kane is, of course, been on everyone's team for a while. You got Haaland, you said the injury concerns, and we got Tony with the gambling ban concerns. Watkins, of your consideration to be a differential, that's the one I'm going with. Get Ollie Watkins in your team right now.
I love the Watkins shout. He plays in 29. They also play in 32 in case that's a consideration. And they also play Forest in 30. So if you bring him in for 29, if you don't already have him in your squad, it's almost like you get the 3 fixture run where you can really decide what you want to do with them. And then they don't double in 34, so it's kind of easy to move on from him. You're not going to be kind of stuck with him forever. He's at a price point that allows you to move fairly easily between a lot of other players, right? You could move him back to someone like Tony at some point if you needed to, or I don't know, even consider like a Chelsea forward at some point if if you decide to go into someone like Howard's. So I like that one a lot. I think that in general Villa are probably a little under the radar. It seems like they've just, I don't know, they've been pressed recently, and I mean Watkins has always sort of had this potential to go off, and it feels like he's finally starting to. I mean, I don't know. It's not like he's never done anything, but I feel like over the last year and a half or so, he kind of developed this reputation of someone who just couldn't finish. And I don't know. I don't know if he's playing with more confidence or if it's just sort of the sample gets a little bit longer, right? And you sort of revert back to how you kind of should be performing based on expected returns. I don't know, but I agree with you. I think Watkins is a great shout.
All right, good evening. That's all I got to say. Is I think that the whole the resurgence of Villa to come in with this renewed identity under the new manager, right? What's the old Arsenal manager? Yeah, the Spanish guy. Why can't I remember his name? Anyways, I feel like that if you're finding forwards that are going to produce more than everyone's been taking risks on Darwin and Havertz, and even Tony and even Haaland. I feel like the forward position is kind of the differential spot. I've seen a couple people put in Isak. That's not a bad shout, right?
Yep. I mean, God, he looks so good in was it the last the international break always kind of screws up my memory of when. By the way, it was Unai Emery. I didn't want to interrupt. Unai Emery. But it was I feel like Isak had that terrific brace. He looks really good at the moment, and Newcastle, maybe just because they haven't really blown anyone away the last couple of weeks, it feels like they're maybe flying slightly under the radar at the moment. But they do play. It's Man United at home, West Ham away. So it's sort of interesting. There almost isn't one single team that plays twice where you're like, this this is the one. This is the match that I don't know. There's not even like one of those like. I mean, I guess like the best single the best single fixture for a top 14 that plays twice would I guess be Man United at home to Brentford. But even that's not like an especially strong fixture, right? I mean, Brentford are pretty strong defensively. So yeah, I think there is a lot of room for going a little bit different here. What about West Ham? Like really no one has talked about West Ham in the lead up to 29, kind of all season in fantasy. They just really haven't been a factor at all. Would you consider kind of anybody on West Ham, a defender, a midfielder, anybody?
So, like, if we're talking about stats, then Ben Rama has been getting a lot of touches in the final third. What he does with them and what West Ham are able to do, that's kind of up to them. And, I mean, you said what they should have fired Moyes a month ago. So who knows what happens?
Careful.
But
I've got some trouble for this take.
But I think that if you're going to take a punt, I think Ben Rama is the guy from West Ham to take a punt on.
Yeah, I think that, but Paqueta has gotten a little bit of attention as well. I just feel like, I mean, I don't even know. I would say it's a fade because no one's really on them. But I just think when you look at all these teams that play twice, it's just hard to look at West Ham and think. I mean, the one thing that's appealing about them, kind of uniquely outside of Liverpool, is that they play in 29 and they don't blank in 32 and they double in 34. So that is the one thing that's slightly appealing about them is you wouldn't have to worry about making any moves to either target a double later on but I just who do I want from West Ham that I'm like, yeah, I want to hold this guy in my squad for the next 6 game weeks. It's just hard to like really feel super excited about anybody. It just feels like it's just too much of a blind punt. Like I never like to make a full on blind punt in fantasy.
Well, that's kind of the problem, right? Like it's not the price. The prices aren't dissuading us from purchasing any player. It's the taking up the midfield slot. So I think at the beginning of the season, we were all like, oh man, we're going to buy all these forwards and it's going to be great. And then we were like, oh no, I only have 5 midfielders that I can fit into my team. And so right now it's just kind of impossible to take a punt on a midfielder because most days we're going to, at the very least, have like our 5th midfielder as our first bench spot, right? Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, I think I will, however, shout out another midfielder right now, despite what you just said, which is James Maddison. Plays been playing quite a bit better recently. Picked up an assist in game week 27. Plays away to Palace in 27, home to Villa away to Palace in the first half of 29, and then home to Villa in the second half. So I think that he's another player that you could at least consider. I'm sort of like. I feel like I'm pretty well known for long-term listeners of not being a massive fan of James Maddison, but fixtures are fixtures, and they have a nice 29, and then they play Bournemouth at home in game week 30. So from there, it's not terrific, but I think that you could really make a case for Maddison over the next couple of weeks.
All right, he's in my squad right now.
Is he? Okay. Yep.
Yeah,
okay.
He's in. I mean, we like to have fun here. I mean, like that's the thing. It's like you gotta have one player that's fun, and you're just like, all right, if it hits, it hits. If it doesn't, no sweat off my back.
I totally agree. I think that you have to. And that's actually what Solanke is a little bit like that for me, where I just wanted somebody who, if he bangs, it's like they're just my points, right? It's like every now and then you want a player is just like, if this guy scores, it's me and 4 other people that get to celebrate. Like that is just the best feeling in fantasy. He also made the rest of my team structure work, but let's pretend that it was all for it was just me chasing glory. So let's see any other players that stand out. I mean, we only kind of nodded at Kai Havertz. I mean, what do you think about Chelsea in general? You mentioned Chilwell before too. I mean, that's probably in general. I think people have been a little wary of Chelsea, and I guess that I still am. But how do you feel about Chelsea going into 29?
I mean, I kind of predicted this kind of like massive failure of what Chelsea was trying to do this year, right? Like it just seemed weird what they were doing. Of course, the new American owner, everything's weird. I feel like if you're going to try to do Chelsea and FPL, like you got to get one of the defenders. And as we all know, everyone go into your notes app right now and just say never get Reece James, because that's what you should do. You should just never get him. It's stupid.
Another frustrating run. Well, what did he got? He got an assist, but then they conceded 2 goals and he got a yellow card, right? So it was like he got like 2 points the hard way, basically. And that.
Yeah, exactly. It's nonsense. But yes, I do have Chilwell. I mean, I'm bench boosting, so he's going to get into my squad this week. But like beyond that, I'm not expecting much from him.
Yeah, it's Chilwell, I think, would be the one, but just in general, I mean, they're not performing especially strong defensively at the moment, and it's just hard to have a ton of faith, really. I mean, I guess they have 1 clean sheet in their last 6, and that was home to Leeds, a 1-0 win. So it's I mean, like I think he's got a high ceiling. I can certainly see why you brought him in on your wild card. I think it makes a lot of sense, but I don't know that I would really make a strong case for transferring in any of these Chelsea players. I mean, I'm sure they will have some like relatively high ownership just because they're a popular club and it's kind of worth just taking the punt on. But I just see more there are spots that just seem more fun for me to take a punt on than like bringing in someone from Chelsea. And the price point's not great either, right? I mean, if you're going to bring in Chilwell, that's a 6 million expense, right? It's not it's like you have to kind of like make some of their sacrifice in your squad to bring him in. So I think it makes sense for you on a wild card. Certainly you thought, playing Everton at home at 28, it was going to work out better than it did. But I don't know that I'd really advocate strongly for transferring in Chilwell going into 29.
No, that's why I said, like, if you're going to bring in these questionable defensive assets, the best risk way to do it is to bring in the goalkeeper, right? Because then they can get save points, where these defenders, they can't get anything unless they're like an attacking wing back, or they're going to get clean sheets. And I think that we've watched Chelsea enough, and we just know that it's going to be really hard for them to keep clean sheets, but it won't matter for Kepa because you can get points for clean sheets. Yep. Whereas Chilwell is like, cool, like maybe he'll get an attacking return or an assist or something. But
so we talked about just all the teams that double. We talked about Villa, Bournemouth. We didn't really talk about Brentford too much, outside of me just noting that they're playing really well. I have Ivan Toney. Do you have Ivan Toney as well in your squad?
I do.
Yep. So I think Ivan Toney is pretty highly owned already. We talked about Chelsea. We haven't talked about Leeds. Leeds, Forest.
Do we have to?
No, we don't have to. But Leeds and Forest are the two that we really haven't discussed at all. I guess Newcastle as well, although I have Trippier much like everybody else. I actually have Botman as well, and that's just sort of me. I'm going to ride it out, and I don't know. They haven't been keeping a lot of clean sheets. Maybe the tide will turn a little bit. But just when it comes to Forest and Leeds, are there any players that we could even just kind of lightly consider from either of those two squads, or is it just a total write-off for those two teams?
I mean, I'm good. I had the Noto guy for a bit.
Yep,
he was enabling me, and when I had it, he scored me a goal and got me an assist, and I was like, beautiful. Thank you, bye. We're done with you.
Again, never. Yeah, exactly. It's a great transaction.
I was going to say that the Newcastle defense is like interesting, right? So like everybody has Trippier, so it doesn't affect anything. I think that I've been watching people take risks on getting double or even triple like Newcastle defense, and it's obviously when it works, it pays off ridiculously, but it's like a huge kind of like risk reward thing, right?
Yeah. Well, this brings me to my final thought here, which is something that I think that people don't necessarily consider a lot when it comes to how to be a little different. It's not just about the players that you bring in, but it's a little bit about how you set up your formation. And I think overloading your squad is a super high risk, high reward strategy that a lot of people sort of just don't really want to do. But if you are serious and like if you genuinely don't care if it fails, right? Like you're like, I'm going to go all in this, and if it fails, I can accept it. Because a lot of people say that, Eric, and then when it actually happens and blows up, they get very upset. But if you're willing to take the risk, then a triple up on a triple up on the Newcastle defense, or triple up on the Brighton midfielders. Just like basically kind of going all in. But I think especially when it comes to defenders, I think that's an area where overloading can really work because it often doesn't cost that much money to have 3 players from some of these squads. And then if you can get even 1 clean sheet from them, it can be a massive rank driver, especially if people only have, 0 or 1 player. So I think that, the only problem with doing that with Brighton, which would be one of the teams that had the most appeal, is that that would mean not having Matoma or I don't know, McAllister or something like that. And so it's maybe a little less appealing, but I do think that's like something to consider. Like maybe you bring in, just looking at Man United, like looking ahead, the Casemiro thing screws us up a little bit, but going De Gea and Shaw, right? Just having that kind of extra defender, that could be one way to be a little different, and just understand that it's not necessarily optimal strategy, but it's the kind of high risk strategy that could really pan out if it works.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like when you're asking about differentials, right? Before it used to be, it's like, oh, we're going to bring in, random midfielder from whatever team.
Yeah.
I think the best differential nowadays, especially with what we're looking at, like you said, Brighton, and especially like Arsenal, like the differential now is getting the right midfielder from Brighton or Arsenal.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to do. It's like it's like obviously Saka is a beast, and like I think we should all have Saka single game week, be damned, it doesn't matter.
Yep.
But the weird thing is it's like man, when Mitoma was cheap, like everyone is like, oh, he's so cheap and he's gonna bang for us, and it is what it is. And I think like differential means something now just because we have these options of like who's going to be the best, Mitoma, McAllister, March, Saka, Odegaard, or Martinelli, or these kind of guys. I think that's the differential, is getting the right combination of players from these teams who are producing a lot. And I think that's the best way to really like propel yourself.
Yeah, I think that's right. Although sometimes if you just can't decide, then you can also just get all of them and hope that one of them. Because that's really a strategy that would have worked the last few weeks, right? If you had just gone all in with Martinelli and Odegaard and Saka, that really would have been a really effective strategy. Especially the way Martinelli has just completely turned it back on. Again, and so sometimes it is. Sometimes there's kind of no logic to this stuff either. Martinelli looked. You know what it really was? It was him scoring that goal in the final. So maybe again, this is where the eye test comes in. Although again, this stuff is always more like obvious in hindsight. But him scoring that little tap in goal and to go up 4-2 in that Aston Villa comeback. Remember that where?
I do.
Yeah, and where Martinez came forward, and a rough match for Martinez, who I love, and but I felt like that gave him this like incredible burst of confidence, and he's just been on absolute fire since then. And he also doesn't play, or he didn't play for Brazil. He stayed. I think he just didn't get called up. I don't think he pretended to have an injury. He just didn't get called up for Brazil's friendly. So I think that he might be one to consider as well. I wouldn't necessarily be so eager to drop him for a double game weeker either. I think that even someone like Matoma, I think I'd think twice about. Odegaard is a little more up and down, right? He's a little streakier, and so I think that he's one you could get away with a little more easily. But if I had Martinelli, I think I would prefer him over almost all of the double game week options for 29.
Yeah, I'm with you. And just talking it out now, I think the transfer now is Odegaard, Matoma, lock it.
Yeah, lock it. I think that makes sense. Make sure, Matoma doesn't come back from Japan with a nagging, knee injury or something like that. But this is the week to wait until at least. I know it gets tricky with the price changes and stuff, but I would really try to wait until at least Thursday if you could to make any transfers.
Yeah, I think Japan plays Colombia on Tuesday, so he'll be playing against his Estupiñán, or no, he's Ecuadorian. No,
got it. Are those matches being played in Europe, or are
they
being?
No, it's in Japan.
It's in Japan. Okay.
So Uruguay and Colombia went over there, and they're playing international friendlies with Japan and Korea.
Okay, got it. Okay, got it. Cool. All right. Well, that's your pod. That flew by. Erik, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. That was an hour and 10 minutes. That was an absolute breeze. I really enjoyed having you on. It was fun talking to you. Thanks for talking things through, and thanks for your perspective as well. Not just on Uruguay, but on everything. And but so thanks again. And if you want to support the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/alwayscheating. Erik, as he mentioned before, very kindly is a Patreon supporter, has been for a long time. You can chat with us in the Slack, get an extra podcast each week. And by the way, any final thoughts or anything you want to say, Erik, before we close things off here?
Oh, I just want to say Uruguay no ma. Uruguay is the best. Come on, let's go. What are we doing here?
What does that mean?
Uruguay no ma. Uruguay and no one else. We're the only country that matters in global football. We don't care about we don't care nothing about the U.S. national team, Brazil, all those guys.
Yeah, okay. It's enough slander. We can't. This is Erik. I need it's like one of those tweet signatures where this man's voice does not stand for the words do not signal endorsement or something like that. But no. But thanks, Erik, for coming on. I mean, they are 2-time World Cup winners after all. All right, so Patreon.com. The U.S. has actually looked decent, I have to say. That was against Grenada, but it was nice to see them get.
Congrats on Grenada, bro!
I know. Listen, we it's been a tough couple months for us. We'll take what we can get. So once again, if you want to support the podcast, go to patreon.com/alwayscheating. I want a quick thank you to our producers, Mike DePietro, Trevor Ingerson. He was my buddy at Madison Square Garden when I went to go see. Michigan State lose in overtime. Great game, though.
Nice.
Yeah. Our buddy Chris Howell, his Tennessee team, lost that same night. It was a tough time for both of us. The Big Gaffer, Babas Kuhn, James Holland, Dave Wagner-Lodell, Nick Wright, Lazarus Janos, Jesse Halstead, Bruce Kerr, Brian Chin, Rich Evans, Blair Jacobson, Todd Byerly, Andy Portlock, Dan Parsons at FPL Merch, Carrie Swanson, Jefferson Turner, Francis Moore, Sam Shower, Khaled Robbie, Lee Hickman, Velger Paulson Kruger, Alex Holcomb, James Keatley, The Saint, Bob Fox, Craig Jackson, James Conroy, Shellen F. Kadakia, Terrence O'Donnell, Paul Herzig, Heath Cram, Roberto Morales, Thomas Tisloff, and Noah and Louise. You can rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, Acast. Follow us on Twitter at HailCheaters, Instagram at HailCheaters, Facebook at Always Cheating. You can email us hailcheaters@gmail.com. We'll respond within 24 hours, most likely. And you can visit our website, alwayscheating.com, to find all this information and more. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening to the podcast. Erik, thank you once again for coming on. I really, really appreciate it.
Of course, y'all, join the Patreon. We talking over there. Let's go.
All right. Thanks again, man. Bye.